4, 3, 2.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our COVID-19 weekly media briefing with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Vigili, Hispanic Public Information Officer for Montgomery County Government. And joining us today is Earl Stoddard, who is our Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Dr. Stoddard will be available for the Q&A portion of this presentation, as well as Sean O'Donnell, who is with the Department of Health and Human Services. Also joining us today is Council President Gabe Albornoz. Good afternoon, Mr. Albornoz, who is here, joined also by the Office of Human Rights Director, Jim Stowe, and longtime fair housing advocate, Jackie Simon. They will be doing first a fair housing proclamation presentation. After that, we will toss it to the county executive and Mr. O'Donnell for their COVID-19 public health update. And after that, we will have members of Effective Law Enforcement for All presenting a report. Joining us today is David Douglas, as well as Dr. Ashley Burns. And last but not least, here today is also Dr. Gilberto Zelaya from the Board of Elections, who will be available for the Q&A portion of this presentation to answer any questions regarding the primary gubernatorial election in the state of Maryland. And with that long introduction, I toss it to you now, Mr. County Executive, for the proclamation presentation. Good afternoon.
So, thank you for joining us today. We know there's a lot to get to this week, including the election and important COVID-19 update and message for the public, but we'll start by marking an important milestone. Before national action, 55 years ago today, Montgomery County passed its open housing law on July 20th, 1967, to commit to fair housing for all. I don't know if a lot of residents realize this, but back in that time, people had prohibitive covenants on their deeds. Much of Montgomery County, you couldn't sell or rent property to a Black person or a Jew, and in some cases, Catholics. And that was embedded in people's deeds. Things have changed a lot, and this was the beginning of that great effort to change things. And the county's action came almost 9 months before President Lyndon B. Johnson made the same promise with the Fair Housing Act. Montgomery County's kept this promise to develop outreach programs so families don't face discrimination. Our law protects everyone who buys or rents a home from discrimination because of their age, race, color, religion, or national origin, sex, disability, sexual orientation, source of income, gender identity, marital status, or familial status, and most recently, their criminal history. That's especially important in an area as diverse as ours. I want to thank Director of Office of Human Rights, Jim Stowe, and his team, the Montgomery County Human Rights Commission, the Interagency for Housing Coordinating Group, the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, Montgomery County NAACP, the Housing Opportunity Commission, and the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors and others who have been involved in fair housing enforcement efforts and activities. So now at this time, I'd like to bring Council President Gabe Albornoz for some remarks and then have him help deliver this joint proclamation.
Well, thank you, Mr. County Executive. It's an honor to join you this afternoon, and I want to begin by acknowledging and thanking Director Stowe and his team and the Commission for their leadership. The Office of Human Rights plays a critical function in Montgomery County, ensuring that we enact with fidelity the laws that Montgomery County has passed now over generations to ensure that we have social and racial equity here in our community. That work has never been more important than right now, as our systems are being tested in ways that we couldn't have imagined for so many years. And in some ways feels like there are forces trying to take us backwards. And so that's why it's critical that we lean in and recognize the importance of measures such as the one we are about to provide a proclamation for, to remember that while we have come a long way, we still have a long way to go. And I can say in the first person that in this last year in particular, when I had the opportunity to visit even more with residents and constituents during this election season, housing consistently was among the issues presented as the deepest concern of residents, and that crossed socioeconomic status, that crossed generations, that crossed zip codes. And so I'm honored to be here today on behalf of all of my colleagues and look forward to reading this proclamation with the county executive. Mr. County Executive, do we have Mr. Stowe speak now or after we do the proclamation?
We can let him speak now.
Great. Director Stowe. You're on mute.
Thank you again to our county executive and also to you as well, Councilman President, for this proclamation. We're so very pleased that it's part of this program today as well. But this is where we are. This is the most essential part of what we do here in Montgomery County. This is the most fundamental thing for all of us in terms of our base, where we live, our shelter, as it were. And so we are looking forward to some increased enforcement activities coming up this next year. We're beginning a campaign of looking at more monitoring. Also, we're looking at testing as well in our community, as well as trying to inform and make real sure then that persons are aware of what their rights are. And so we're calling upon institutions across this community who are involved in, again, housing, lending particularly, that they in fact are informing individuals about their rights under the law here in Montgomery County to ensure that their process is fair and accessible. But all of that could be all possible had it not been for the work and the efforts of those who were involved back in 1967. And we're pleased this morning to have one of those persons who was on the front lines, as it were, engaged in that process, Jackie Simon. So, and by the way, folks, it was women who in fact pushed this effort across the goal line, as it were. So make sure that's very, very clear. And one of those persons are here today, and I would love to have her make a quick comment, if you will.
Sure.
Mr. County Executive.
Good morning, all. Little would I have believed 55 years ago and 5 nights of public hearings that we'd still be where we are today. And we have made progress in many, many arenas and areas. But I'm sad to say that discrimination is still a significant part of life in Montgomery County. For many who are disenfranchised by the color of their skin, can't find housing because of their source of income, have a disability, and a landlord doesn't want a wheelchair that will damage the walls. It's hard to believe that the efforts and the goodwill that have been with us all this time, and the fact that there still is a need for vigorous vigilance. We need to be willing to stand tall. We need to embrace each other. And we need to struggle, whatever the struggle takes, to finally achieve the best that is in us. We have this capacity. I am firmly rooted in that belief. But it takes a vigilance and an effort. We cannot take it for granted. And I thank the executive and council for a proclamation calling attention to this. It allows people who have toiled in this field for a long, long time to know that there continues to be hope and support and effort to achieve that goal. And I am grateful for the opportunity this morning to think back to those times and know how much worse off we were then, but the job is not done. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. So I will read the first 4 sentences of the proclamation and the county executive will take us home. Whereas on January 30th, 1967, the Human Rights Commission voted to submit draft fair housing legislation to the Montgomery County Council. And whereas after 5 nights of public hearings and demonstrations by supporters, the Montgomery County Council enacted the open housing law on July 20th, 1967, nearly a full year before President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Federal Fair Housing Act into law on April 11, 1968. And whereas the open housing law prohibited discrimination in the sale of rental of virtually all housing except owner-occupied housing of 2 rented units or less, and whereas the open housing law was challenged and deemed invalid by the courts in December of 1967, and efforts to rewrite the law began in May 1968, with a new broader law described by federal officials as, quote, the most comprehensive fair housing measure in the United States, unquote, that became the law of the land. And
whereas the open housing law resulted from the hard work of dedicated residents and county civil rights leaders to address discrimination in housing and significantly advance the local civil rights movement to ensure that all Montgomery County residents have equal access to housing. And whereas the Montgomery County Office of Human Rights enforces the current fair housing law that prohibits discrimination in both residential and commercial real estate on the basis of race, color, religious creed, ancestry, national origin, sex, marital status, physical and mental disability, presence of children, sexual orientation, age, source of income, and gender identity to ensure that all participants in real estate transactions are treated in a consistent and fair manner to ensure equal access to housing opportunities. And whereas housing is a fundamental to the well-being and stability of all our residents and has once again become out of reach for far too many. Now, therefore, do we, Marc Elrich as County Executive and Gabe Albornoz as Council President, in recognition of the 55th anniversary of Fair Housing in Montgomery County, to hereby proclaim July 2022 as Open Housing Month. We encourage all to reaffirm their commitment to fair and equal housing access to housing and unreservedly fight to ensure equal opportunity for all individuals to rent, lease, sell, or buy property in this county. Signed this 20th day of July in the year 2022. Now I'd like to invite, well, Jackie already spoke, so thank you for that.
thanks, everybody. Congratulations.
Thank
Thank you
you,
so much.
everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
you so
Mr.
much.
Council President, Director Stode, and Ms. Simon for joining us today. And with that, Mr. County Executive, let's get started with the COVID-19 public health update.
So the COVID update. This week's COVID case rates have gone up again. We continue to see our positive tests hover around 250 cases per 100,000. Hold on one second. The CDC uses cases per 100,000 along with hospital admissions and bed space to determine the community level status. Montgomery is considered in the medium level, as it has been now for several weeks. One reason our case count hasn't gone down is because of the BA.5 variant, which is also behind the nationwide rise in COVID cases. It accounts for more than 70% of all new cases across Montgomery County and America. Health experts say that the BA.5 variant is highly contagious, and we're seeing it infect people who are fully vaccinated and boosted, as well as those who are not. Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services leaders are worried that our community level status could go from medium to high if our hospitalizations continue to rise. We've been right under the benchmarks now for a few weeks. The percent of staffed inpatient beds occupied by those who've tested positive for COVID is at 9.4%. And the hospital admission rate is just over 8 per 100,000 people. If those figures rise above 10, we risk going from medium to high, and that would trigger new recommendations from the CDC, including face mask use in all indoor public settings. The CDC and Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services recommend the following to help protect you and slow the spread of COVID-19 in our community. First, stay up to date on COVID-19 vaccinations, including booster shots. Second, booster shots are the best way to minimize the risk of serious illness from COVID-19. You may get sick, but the odds of you getting seriously sick are greatly reduced if you've had the booster. CDC data shows that since January, people 50 and older who were vaccinated but not boosted are 2 to 3 times more likely to be hospitalized from COVID-19 than those who are fully boosted. And wear a well-fitting mask around others if you have symptoms or have been exposed to someone with COVID. When on public transportation, as an additional precaution, protect yourself and others during visits to congregate indoor spaces with limited social distancing and ventilation. Get tested if you have symptoms or are exposed. Consider rapid or PCR testing after returning from travel or large gatherings. And if you have a positive COVID test, let your recent close contacts know. If you're at high risk for severe illness from COVID, wear a mask indoors in public settings and talk to your healthcare provider about antiviral treatments or monoclonal antibodies. I'm glad to see also that we have a new vaccine option available soon from Gaithersburg-based Novavax. It just cleared the final hurdle this week for emergency use authorization. And in the coming weeks, we'll offer the first vaccine in the US that uses more traditional virus blocking technology. For more on that, I will now turn this over to Sean O'Donnell for his update on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. County Executive. I would ask that the host would allow me to share my screen, please. Thank you. Okay, taking you through our updated metrics. Just to start with, as the county executive mentioned, we have seen some increases in our transmission rates as measured by the PCR testing. We know that those transmissions are much, much higher. A lot of people are fortunately able to rapidly test at home with the rapid antigen testing and are identifying whether they are positive or negative for COVID that way. Looking at the CDC's reports on the variants, you can see the projections now that the vast majority of new cases are BA5. There are some BA4. There's still a few of the BA2.12 in our community. But in our region, it's mostly BA5, and across the United States, it's mostly BA5. At this point, between BA4 and BA5, it's projected to be from the high 80% to low 90% of all the cases. So we're clearly in another surge. What that means is that the immunity gained from a possible infection during the previous variants may not prevent you from getting this new variant. You know, as we said, we still, these variants are evading the initial immunity from vaccinations or previous infections. However, that gained immunity is helping to prevent people from having more serious illness, at least so far with these variants. And what has been indicated in the past and appears to be holding is, again, that the vaccination and booster immunity is even stronger and more long-lasting than the infection immunity. Very quickly looking at where we're seeing these rises, as you can see across many of the East Coast have very similar increases after coming down from that previous wave. That New York, New Jersey, ourselves in Virginia are all showing some increases in cases. That's the red line. Some increases in hospitalizations now as well, which is the orange line. So this is something we're monitoring very closely, especially as we are seeing a greater number of people with infections and going to the hospitals. The CDC has said that they don't believe that BA4 or BA5 is inherently more severe than other Omicron subvariants, but with a large number of infections, it can increase the amount of hospitalizations that are occurring. Of course, the exact linkage between the two is something we're going to keep monitoring. We have not seen a significant increase in deaths yet. We did not see it with the BA2 and 0.12. There was some increases related to the increased transmissions, but not on the order of what we saw back in the December and January initial Omicron. As you can see there, we unfortunately had 154 deaths with a COVID diagnosis back in January. In this month, we've already seen some of those numbers go up a little bit, but it is more modest compared to the previous variants. I just want to draw your attention to this because, of course, we don't want anyone to become seriously ill. We don't want anyone to die from COVID. If you look at the right here, this is Montgomery County's data on vaccination status for those individuals who did pass from COVID. As you can see, that dark blue line over the last month or so, that rate has gone up. That is our unvaccinated populations. And so we continue to try to make outreach to our populations. If you are not vaccinated, please consider vaccination. It does greatly reduce the serious outcomes from COVID. And being boosted, of course, does that even more so. Just going very quickly with where we're seeing vaccinations. Mostly it is still in the booster phases. Of course, we're continuing to do vaccinations for the other age groups, and including first and second doses now for those who are under 5. To give you a quick update on the under 5 doses, Montgomery County at this point has very close to 8,000 of this age group with at least a first dose. We had our first group of second doses were done last Sunday, and that was with the Pfizer vaccine. And then our first group of Moderna second doses are being given this afternoon and again on Saturday. We're continuing to have people come out, even as we do second doses, come out for first doses. To let you know where we'll be this weekend, especially if parents are looking for a place to get their child a vaccination, a first or second dose. It's a number of schools across the county. Again, we really appreciate the assistance from our MCPS partners letting us come in and helping to host these clinics. Those were the updates we have on COVID today. When we have a chance, I'll be happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Donnell and Mr. County Executive. Now, let's hear the update on the audit report evaluating the Montgomery County Police Department from Effective Law Enforcement for All. Joining us is David Douglas, as well as Dr. Ashley Burns. Good afternoon. Who's going to go first?
I am. Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. As many on this call know, that beginning in late 2020 and through 2021, in conjunction with the Reimagining Public Task Force, Effective Law Enforcement for All has been conducting an audit of the Montgomery County Police Department. We issued a preliminary report of findings in June of 2021, and our work has continued since then, extending and building upon the findings and recommendations contained in that report. We are especially pleased to report that Chief Jones, the department, the county agree with our recommendations and in fact have already implemented it or are in the process of implementing them. Our findings and recommendations fall generally into 5 or 6 categories, though of course there is overlap and many are interrelated. Nevertheless, those categories are education and training, use of force, internal investigations, mental health crisis response, data collection and analysis, supervision and body-worn camera use, and recruitment. Our final report will include more than 70 recommendations across these areas. So I won't take the time to review all of them today, but rather let me just give a high-level overview of some of our key recommendations. Beginning with training. Training is, of course, foundational to everything else a police department does. And we've made a number of recommendations in this area, including and increasing the emphasis and shifting the emphasis to a guardian culture rather than a warrior culture. This was also, I note, a recommendation of the Public Reimagining Task Force. We also reviewed closely the Academy's curriculum and have made a number of recommendations intended to help the Academy adopt more of an adult learning-based teaching approach, more scenarios and hands-on activities, and also sequencing the courses so that they build upon knowledge and skills officers will need in terms of deriving the benefits from the course. Importantly, we have recommended increased education and cultural sensitivity, anti-bias training, procedural justice, and de-escalation. We've also made a number of recommendations for in-service and field training officer training. We also, importantly, recommended the Academy hire a civilian PhD to serve as the Academy director, and I understand that this is underway. In fact, I should note that the Academy quickly embraced our recommendations. Many have already been fully implemented, and others are continuing to be implemented. Turning to use of force, some may recall that in our June 2021 briefing, we identified use of force as one of our major areas of focus and one of the major areas that needed attention. Generally, what we have recommended is that in addition to training recommendations, that the department take steps to better classify uses of force to enable better analysis and understanding of how force is used by Montgomery County police officers, and to strengthen its investigative processes with respect to uses of force. We've recommended that it adopt a force investigation team, which is increasingly used in many police departments, and that it conduct use of force review boards to give the department a better understanding of how force is used and ways that uses of force can be minimized. We've recommended that they categorize force levels as well. With respect to internal investigations, we've recommended that all investigations of allegations of improper use of force or serious misconduct allegations be investigated. Currently, some of these are simply reviewed at the district level, which in our view leads to the risk of inconsistent application of the appropriate standards. And again, the department has embraced this recommendation as well. Turning to the area of mental health crisis, this was another priority area identified in our preliminary report. And what we observed then, that effective response to individuals experiencing a mental health crisis really requires an ecosystem of agencies to address the issues. It can't be simply limited to changes by the police department. And as a result, we have made a number of recommendations to improve coordination between the agencies and entities that are involved in responding to and handling calls for individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. This is also an area that was called out for us to continue working with the county to improve coordination among all the constituent agencies. Generally, we have recommended better training, broader deployment of officers trained to respond to individuals experiencing a mental or emotional health crisis, better education of officers concerning the resources available to respond to mental health crises, and better communication to the public about the county's capacity to respond to those experiencing a mental health crisis. And we look forward to continuing to work with the county on implementing these recommendations. We also have recommended that the department enhance its data collection capabilities. Currently, there are many systems. They don't result in a comprehensive data analysis capability. They're heavily reliant on individuals and individual input. there's simply a need to bring the department's data collections capacity up to current generally accepted standards. In the area of data collection, however, we want to particularly flag our recommendation that the department adopt an early warning system. Early warning systems are critical tools to both preserve officers' careers and to save lives. What these systems do is that they flag known indicia of officers who may be struggling, whether because they need more training or because they are experiencing some form of personal or emotional or mental health stress. And it allows a supervisor to intervene and take action before harm arises. And so it's important to understand these systems are not disciplinary systems. They're actually systems designed to help keep officers on track, preserving their careers, and ultimately preventing harm to officers or the public. We reviewed more than 500 body-worn cameras videos of officers in the field. We've made a number of recommendations on that area, but generally one of our recommendations flowing from that review is that the department strengthen the presence of supervisors on scene. Finally, in the area of recruitment, there isn't a police department in the country that isn't finding this to be a challenging issue, and Montgomery County is no exception. We've made a number of recommendations, one of which I believe was to increase pay, and that one has already been done. We hope that that will have an impact. And we have made a number of other recommendations to hopefully strengthen what is already, frankly, a fairly robust and forward-looking recruitment system. That's it at a high level, and in a nutshell. We look forward to continuing to work with the department and with the county on implementation of these recommendations. Thank you, Mr. County Executive.
So thank you. I'm excited to have this report, and I look forward to the work that'll be done with the various parts of the community, including the council, in terms of implementing this. This has been critical, and I'm glad that we took the time to do a thorough analysis. One of the things I wanted to avoid was just looking at something and saying, well, maybe we ought to do this, maybe we ought to do that, without doing the kind of research that you've done. But I think it's beyond the surface things that we see and goes to the core of what goes wrong sometimes in policing. And I think that's going to help us build a stronger department. And I think it emphasizes what I've made a big point of during a lot of this, which is that a lot of the problems we have are embedded in the training that we do. And people do what they've been trained to do and what they're expected to do. And that may not always be, particularly in this era, what we want people to do. So I'm encouraged that about the report, and I look forward to the work we're going to do in the coming months. And I'm encouraged that we've already begun implementation of pieces of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Dr. Burns, did you have some comments as well as a speaker?
In the interest of time, I'm going to conclude with the remarks that David's provided. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so very much. And now we can open it up for the Q&A portion of this presentation. First set of questions from Tom Fitzgerald, Fox 5 DC. Dr. Zelaya, there you are, you're on, and good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon. As I have in the past, I'll give you all my questions right at the top so we can speed this along. County Executive, just wanted to get your reaction to the close vote that we're still awaiting the results of today. Must be a bit of deja vu for you all again. What do you say to the people in the county as far as what they need to be prepared for over the next couple of days? And Dr. Z, if we've got you now, could you explain to folks why and how this is going to take a little while before we know who the next county executive is?
I feel like it's almost deja vu, except it's not like one night of counting. This is going to be probably 10 days or more before we actually know results. And it got this way because the legislature had passed the bill that would have allowed these votes, the mail-in votes, to be counted starting back when we were doing early voting. And the governor vetoed it because he was unhappy, I guess, with the Republican line about signatures on ballots that were mailed in. And so he vetoed the bill, which meant the county government, no county government was able to start counting the votes as they came in. And so there's a mandatory 2-day waiting period before they start counting. So that takes us to Thursday. I think they count for a couple of days and then they have to count the provisional votes. Provisional votes are people who either, well, for one reason or another, their ballots were marked as provisional. One reason was that somebody asked for a mail-in ballot and they voted in person, since potentially you could have theoretically had 2 ballots. They were given provisional ballots when they voted. So there are tens of thousands of votes between mail-in and absentee, between provisional, that we're not going to know anything for probably 10 days to 2 weeks. And it's messed up.
If I could, right now, the count we have, you trailing, not by a lot, but you're trailing.
No.
Would it be your thought that neither candidate should declare victory until this is all done?
Well, I'm not going to declare victory until it's all done. And I can't imagine what difference it makes if you declare victory, because it has no real legal status. So I think prudent people will wait until more votes are counted. And, I'm optimistic about the votes that are out there.
All right, Dr. Z, could you give people an idea to get their arms around what's out there that needs to be counted? How many of these mail-in ballots, and just kind of give us the tick-tock on how that will proceed.
Okay, good afternoon. First and foremost, before I give you numbers, I want to thank the county executive for giving me this space. But also first and more importantly, I want to thank our poll workers. Without them, there's no way we would be having this conversation. Part of democracy is the process, and our poll workers are our first pillar. And then secondly, our staff, and then lastly, our incredible civic-minded voters. So moving into the numbers really quickly, for election day, total in-person votes was 94,350, which equates to 14.55% of the electorate. Keep in mind, all of these numbers are unofficial, and so they're a moving target. We're still gathering. The provisional hand-counted submitted ballots on election day right now stands at 5,770. And so those are the numbers right now that we have in-house. The total in-person votes for early voting, I'm sure all you guys have that from SBE, but they're 24,704, which constitutes 3.68% of the electorate. And our provisional hand counts collected during 8 consecutive days of early voting from the 7th to the 14th of July is 2,260. As of today, actually, I apologize. As of yesterday, the 19th of July, total mail-in request is at 115,677. And mail-in received as of yesterday, election day, is 29,388. So these are all moving targets. Now, regarding your question about Canvas, which starts tomorrow, everyone's welcome to observe via Streamline or in person. We are right now putting the verbiage together to put on our homepage at 777vote.org. The mail-in first canvas starts tomorrow, 10 a.m., the 21st of July, which is Thursday. Then our provisional ballot canvas will start next Wednesday, the 27th of July. And our mail-in second canvas will begin the 29th, which is a Friday. But of course, we will be continuing to count as long as needed. You don't rush a heart surgeon while they're operating, so we will do our due diligence to count our ballots.
Could you explain what the parameters are for a recount?
So So right now, let's focus on county. So to be honest, we really need to look at ensuring that we have transparency. We will be posting numbers. We don't have 100% reporting right now. We have a couple of outstanding precincts. If you look at the SBE websites, there are approximately, getting a little sticky note, is we have 12 outstanding, 3 were picked up this morning, and we're working to get those uploaded. And 9, we are going through thousands of supply bags. Some of the critical items came through last night, but not all of the memory sticks did not. So we're going through systematically, surgically through all the bags. And the goal is for today to get 100% reporting. And then I will return as it pertains to the procedures for the recount. But right now, the goal is to get these mail-in scanned in as received. Thousands of mail-in ballots were collected last night when the boxes, the ballot drop boxes, the 55 boxes were closed at 8. And right now we're focusing on hand counting and scanning them in so we can get a better picture as we near canvass tomorrow, 10 a.m.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Tom. Next up, it's Kate Ryan, WTOP. Good afternoon, Kate.
Good afternoon. Thanks again. Sorry about that lag. So Tom asked a couple of the questions I wanted to, but again, in terms of the time it will take, is staffing an issue at all, Dr. Zelaya, or are you good for that? And again, I know you allow people to come in and observe. What are they actually going to see?
So what they're going to see, so here's one envelope, one mail-in envelope. There is a flap that we have to remove. And when you remove this flap, it gains access to the voter signature. Once we affirm that there's a signature, there's no need for us to cure. This is the reason why we were pushing the narrative that we wanted our voters to return their mail-in ballot as soon as possible, because if there was a need to cure, we have enough time to contact them. Once we have them, we have to do a hand count. Then we need to scan them in as received. Then we need to sort them in district precinct order. And then we need to introduce them into the canvas mail stream. This is very manual. We use both the right and left hands. We have a robust team, but we're looking at what was sent out by the state and what was requested was 115,000 ballots. So we do not know right now how many ballots were returned over the last couple of days. And there was a huge rush yesterday when our staff closed the ballot drop boxes at 8 p.m. So I could tell you that there's thousands of ballots there, but between yesterday, 8 p.m. and right now at 11:22 p.m., it is virtually impossible for us to give you a hand count and to scan each of those. So the due diligence is basically encourage you to watch us via Streamline in person. That was a kind of a high overview of what to expect, and you multiply that by the thousands of ballots that we need to process. So the buzzword for the next 2 to 3 weeks is patience. And the canvas will be held at the Montgomery College Germantown campus. All of the information and corresponding virtual links will be on our website shortly.
Thank you very much. Can you explain the term cure? I know for you that's an ordinary term, but for the public, they're like, what?
So cure, so it's almost like when you're a physician, when you want to cure a patient. So if there's a missing signature, we want to cure it. We want to make sure that we could incorporate this into the canvas and accept it. And so what we want to do is identify and locate that particular voter and coordinate the ability for them to come into the office so they could sign their corresponding voter oath on the return envelope, which houses their mailed-in ballot.
Terrific. Dr. Celaya, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Next up, Steve Bonnell, Bethesda Beat. Good afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon. Forgive me, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. With the numbers, the COVID numbers kind of ticking up, if we were to get to the high classification that the CDC kind of defines as, are we looking at restrictions like mask mandates or anything like that? And I guess it's for the public health team.
Thank you, Steve. We are going to continue to monitor those hospitalizations. At this point, we haven't discussed a mask mandate. If in conversations with our hospitals, we are reaching a point where their surge capacity is going to be threatened, we would certainly look at additional recommendations to the council and to our leadership. At this time, again, whenever transmissions go up, we strongly encourage the population to consider using masks, especially when they're indoors, especially if they are a vulnerable population who is more likely to have a severe outcome from COVID. But we haven't set a specific limit. It is very consistent with the CDC's guidance that the hospitalizations at this point are driving the wider recommendations for public health restrictions.
Okay, thanks. And on to the election, if Dr. Zalea is still on, I know that you don't have a number per se of ballots that have come in. You know, I've been looking at the state site pretty judiciously, and it's at that 29,000 number. Are we expecting, can you even say like tens of thousands of more mail-in ballots? Because that's the case, that's a lot more to count. I'm just wondering if there's even any rough idea in terms of how many were in the drop boxes and are coming in the mail the coming days.
So unfortunately, when a bipartisan drop box attendants emptied out each box, they didn't do a hand count. All they said was, that's a lot of ballots. That's all they were saying. And if you go on our Twitter feed, we would historically follow them, and you would see onesies and twosies. And when we were calling them, they were saying there's a lot of ballots. And so unfortunately, I can't give you a number by saying more than there's a lot of ballots. And once we start unseating and following the chain of custody procedures, when we could enter each of those ballot blue bins that were seated in to fill after we emptied out the boxes, I couldn't tell you, but there's 55 ballot drop boxes. They were all picked up over the last couple of days. And so the numbers that SBE provides are what was scanned in, and that's the best. But right now they're literally working, doing their due diligence. We have a team that's going through those bins, but I can promise you that all of the bins that have been collected over the last couple of days are not going to be done today in the next couple of hours. It's going to take time. So in tandem, as we have canvas, provisional research and provisional canvas, we'll be also processing all of those blue bins collected over the last couple of weeks.
And the last question for the county executive, it's similar to what's been already asked and follows up on our conversation from yesterday, but given how close this vote total is and, you know, just the deja vu of it all, just how are you feeling? I mean, we're expecting it to be this close, frankly, given how the campaign has gone the last month, 2 months?
Yeah, I kind of expected it to be close. I mean, anybody who's been here long enough knows this is the dirtiest campaign that's ever happened in Montgomery County. It's flat out true. And they have millionaires and real estate interests pouring in the level of money they poured into this campaign with basically negative advertising. There's not a positive message, and most of it is, you know, really discouraging. And I talked to a lot of voters who were really discouraged by that because, you know, we have a publicly financed system. If I maxed out, I wind up with about $1 million. I have no ability when somebody puts out an ad to go back out and, you know, find $500,000 and create a response to it. And so it was very well calculated. And I will say, I thought, you know, the Post did a very deliberate job of writing, you know, completely false statements and then handing them basically to Blair that he could put into his advertising, and Hans as well. If we ever sit down and talk about what's not true, I'm more than happy to have that discussion with you. But it's really alarming. You know, when you look at FCC regulation, if you're advertising a product and you lied and that became known, you could be required to take the advertising down. They have a special exception for politicians, and politicians are allowed to lie in their advertising. And that's just beyond belief because it's the most important decisions that voters make. And everybody's thrown up their hands and said, well, they can say anything they want. Very discouraging. Not good for democracy.
Do you, the mail-in, since you're down, I think last time you were actually up at this point, are you optimistic about the mail-in ballot count? Because that's obviously what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about the mail-in ballot count for a number of reasons, which I won't go into right now. But I have reasons to be optimistic about it.
Well, I think our readers want to know why, but
well, That would just be speculation on my part. We'll find out whether I was right to be optimistic, pretty soon.
Okay,
Pretty soon, probably a week or two.
okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve. Up next, Kevin Lewis, ABC 7. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Good afternoon to all of you. Dr. Z, I'll start with some questions about process with you, and then County Executive Elrich has had a few follow-up questions. So just to confirm, roughly around 115,000 mail-in ballots were requested, but only around 30,000 were received as of Election Day through traditional mail. Did I hear that right?
No, so as of the 19th, 29th, yeah, it's about 30,000. But we don't break down as in what mode, whether it was in person or a ballot drop box or USPS. But what received in-house is 29,388.
Okay. And what was the cutoff day for mail-in ballots? Did it have to be postmarked by the election day?
Yep, you got the answer.
Okay. And then the 52 drop boxes, you had up until 8 p.m. yesterday to put your ballot in the drop box or drop it off at election headquarters up in Gaithersburg.
You are correct.
Okay. And what was like the process? I mean, was there someone at all 52 drop boxes at 8 p.m. to ensure no one slipped in the ballot at 8:05?
You got the answer.
Okay. So what is the soonest all results will be posted online?
You're talking about the election day or the entire cake?
The entire, I mean, so my understanding is early voting is 100% posted online.
Mhm.
The election day minus those 10, 8,
The 12
precincts
Mhm.
are posted in full. So I guess my first question, when do you expect all 258, was it, precincts to be posted in full?
Our goal will be today, to be honest, and we're working on that right now. It's 1:31. Once I'm off this briefing, I will go downstairs to see the team, see what's going on. So that's the goal by close of business today. Regarding the canvas, as I mentioned earlier, until we are done counting. It's a meticulous surgical process. We want to make sure that all return mail-in ballots postmarked by the 19th of July arrive. Keep in mind, not all voters live in Montgomery County. They're across the globe, so we must do our due diligence, and we allow them enough time for the second mail-in canvas, especially our military overseas and expats. And so it's the process. We will be posting information on our website, especially canvas information, and I welcome everyone to come observe, whether virtual or in person.
And you said that second canvas isn't taking place until next week?
Yes, the dates. So first canvas starts tomorrow. Provisional ballot canvas will start next Wednesday, the 27th, because all of those submitted provisional ballots we must research. Number one, why either, as County Executive mentioned, probably someone requested to vote by mail, had a change of heart and decided to vote in person. So we want to make sure that we don't have a mailed-in ballot on behalf of that individual. So that takes time to do the research and our due diligence. And then the second mail-in canvas will start Friday, the 29th. And if needed, we will add additional dates as needed.
The last question for you, unless you wanted to add anything, around 115,000 mail-in ballots requested here in the 2022 election. Did you have that statistic for the 2018 election, just to show context of how popular this method has gotten?
I don't, but I could tell you it's much higher for the current election. Keep in mind, we're coming off the 2020 election / the onset of COVID. And so remember, in the primary 2020 election, all registered voters were mailed the mail-in ballot. For the general election, that was switched and individuals were mailed an application. And so I think the interest in the fact that they saw that this process, which has existed since the Civil War, works and it's safe and secure. And so we had a lot of individuals that took advantage of that opportunity. Remember, you have three options. I call Maryland elections the cheesecake factory of the electorate. You have mail-in, you have voting during 8 consecutive days at 14 early voting centers. Remember, we expanded from 11 to 14, and then also you had election day.
So the earliest that we would have final results, knowing that there's canvas number 2 next week, would be maybe Friday the 29th or maybe the 27th.
You're saying that, I'm not. We're going to continue until we're done counting.
And is canvas number 2 far less number of mail-in ballots than canvas number 1, presumably?
The second canvas starts Friday, the 29th, my friend.
Uh-huh. And is that canvas, though, a far lower number of ballots than the first canvas?
So right now I came and ascertained, we have the mail-in request numbers. I can't tell you what percentage are overseas, what percentage are domestic, what percentage are coming from which direction. All we could tell you is that what was requested and what was received.
All right. Well, that moves the needle enough. So thank you for answering all those questions. County Executive, Hans Riemer's hovering just below 21% of the vote right now. Do you think Hans helped or hurt you?
Mr. County Executive, you're muted. And also if you can flip the phone so we can fix your video, you're kind of sideways right now.
Okay. Sorry, my computer.
There you go. Better. There, perfect.
My computer inexplicably demised itself. I'm on my phone now. Yeah, I think it hurt more than it helped. I think his really misinformed and I'd say disingenuous attacks, particularly on the housing issue, were kind of stunning. And I, spent a lot of time answering people's questions. And the problem is, what most people got to see during debates is 1 and 2 minute answers. And that's really hard to discuss any issue of substance in 1 or 2 minutes. And it's stunningly difficult to do that in a 30-second advertisement. And I think what really was lacking was a real honest, full debate on the substance of the issues. I mean, Blair had actually no plan for how to do housing other than say we ought to build around metro stations, which it doesn't take a rocket scientist, and we're already doing that. And Hans, I think, but he insisted he was going to win. That actually didn't happen, and not close.
Do you feel he ate into your voting block, or the negative campaigning that you're saying he did cause people to think poorly of you?
Well, I think, his idea that I had blocked, and he started these ads about I blocked affordable housing, which of course is not something I'd ever done, or that I refused to open the schools, or I closed the schools, which is actually something I never did, or that there wasn't solar in the ag because he couldn't pass a bill, which I wouldn't have been able to veto, but he blamed me for not being able to get a solar thing. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff that was really disingenuous. And he knew what he was doing. It just didn't work the way he wanted it to work. And I think David was the main beneficiary of it because he had the ability to put millions and millions of dollars into this race. Not just him, but the developer group, which, formed one pack, the Progressives for Progress, which, if you know the people in the group, the word progressive has no bearing on them. And then funding the Affordable Housing Pact from people who are funding it, who actually have no interest in affordable housing and prefer that we actually build less. It was really priceless, but not much you can do when they've got that much money. That is a fundamental problem in politics, when money becomes speech and you can say anything you want to say. But I'm proud of the way I campaigned. I stayed out of the mud. It is what it is. But I feel pretty good about what's out there, like I said.
And then as a follow-up, do you have any intel that indicates the possibly 100,000 plus outstanding mail-in ballots cut in your favor at a rate more favorable than your opponents?
Like I said, I don't want to talk about what we're thinking, but I think there are, a lot of votes came in, let's say, just to say this, a lot of votes came in before the slew of negative advertising really bombarded the airwaves. And I think that, the negative stuff was effective at the end. A lot of people, and, the polls were different a few weeks ago. before the negative stuff really became overwhelming. There's a lot of votes that probably got cast. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Kate Ryan, do you have a follow-up question?
I do, and it's pretty brief for the county executive. I think some of the question might be, after 4 years in office, how is it that you weren't able to broaden your appeal to offset whatever inroads your opponents might make? And do you see any area where you might have done something differently?
No, I defend what we did. I mean, we have record spending on affordable housing. What I can't do is I didn't have the ability to misinform people the way somebody with millions and millions of dollars from him and his friends did. And that's really, hard to overcome. If you drumbeat a message, I mean, I saw the ads. I mean, the only thing they didn't do is put horns on me, I think. But it's, it was really, really aimed at purely attack. Don't vote for, which is not much of a positive message about where you want to go, but it was hard. And, they tied in the Post quotes, which are tailor-made for an advertising piece from somebody. So it's hard to overcome that, because the Post is seen as, the neutral arbiter. Anybody who would sit in the meeting, would have sat in my interview meeting with the Post, would never have gotten that impression. I don't know what else to do. I mean, look, if you say that we brought the county to the brink of economic failure, and then you look at all the jobs that are coming here and the industries that are expanding here, and the fact that our unemployment is lower than it was when COVID started, I mean, there's a lot of reason to believe that's not true. But I couldn't fund an ad that would say that. So it's kind of paralyzing.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. I do not see any more requests for questions from members of the media. Going once, going twice. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thanks to the participants, to the members of the media, and to you, the audience. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe. We'll see you again next week.